have you ever ridden a monorail? Ah, I bet you have. You know why they call it a monorail? It sits on a single beam. Yes, we know that. But were you aware that the monorail has been around since 1897? Since then, the look of the monorail has changed quite a bit. In fact, some early attempts saw cars running along railways, while others along beams elevated above the ground. It continued to evolve through the 20th century. Many people began to see the monorails as the future of mass transit. Isn't that just wild? I'll be back, honey. I just gotta step out. I'm gonna take a trip on the monorail. See you in 15, babe. Yeah.
Traffic engineers agree that a monorail system could well be an answer to growing traffic congestion. In large cities where land is at a premium, an aerial monorail system needs only a narrow beamway supported by pylons. The accent is on economy. With the advent of such highways in the sky, the weary commuter will find himself traveling in speed, comfort, and safety. Tomorrow's living areas will expand as the beamways of modern monorail systems begin to crisscross metropolitan centers.
So I'd like to start by asking our viewers a question. When did you experience your first monorail?
It was 1994. I remember it coming by my little head above me, and I'm looking up there at the TTC, and I'm like, Mommy, what's that? And she's like, that's a train. That's a train from the future.
I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite rides outside of the theme park. It's a very peaceful experience. Even if it's a little bit crowded, it's still fun, and it gives you a really nice bird's eye view of some of the Walt Disney World Resort.
I mean, I love the monorail. I think it's just an amazing transportation system of the future, but it's today, so I feel like we're living in the future, and it's just amazing. I really wish that more cities and more places would adopt a monorail system like that.
From what I understand, Walt Disney experienced his first monorail on a visit to Europe, and after that he just knew that he had to have one for the theme park he was developing in Anaheim, California.
To open the first operating monorail system in America, it is our good fortune to have our friend and fellow Californian, the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Richard Nixon, and his charming family, Mrs. Pat Nixon, Julia, and Patricia, his daughters.
Disney's team collaborated with a German company in order to design the Mark I monorail. The people at Allweg were pioneers in monorail design. An Allweg monorail always seemed to consist of a vehicle riding along an elevated rail. In 1959, the Disneyland Allweg monorail system became the first daily running monorail system in the Western Hemisphere. In 1961, the Disneyland monorail saw a huge upgrade that made it possible to transport even more guests around the Disneyland Resort. It was called the Mark II monorail. Of course, it should be said that Disneyland was not the only project that Allweg was working on. Their designs were also used for the Tokyo monorail in anticipation for the Olympic Games.
Part of the monorail follows the coastline of Tokyo Bay. When visitors arrive for the Olympics, they will find travel time from the airport cut in half. Don't worry, if you miss one train, another will be along in 7 minutes.
Now these folks must have been very popular because at the same time, Allweg was developing a transit system for the 1962 World's Fair in Seattle, Washington. They worked for 8 months to construct Seattle's monorail system that would take many of the 10 million attendees from downtown Seattle to the Century 21 Exposition. It also offered an incredible view of the Space Needle. I also give him a lot of credit, and I'll tell you why. The Tokyo monorail, the Seattle monorail, and of course the Disneyland monorail, they all still run today. Alright, so here's the fun part. Let's head over to Flushing Meadows. If you've been keeping up with any of our past World's Fair videos, you probably already know that the 1964-65 World's Fair in New York, well, it wasn't an official World's Fair since it wasn't sanctioned by the Bureau of International Exposition. One of the big reasons that the Bureau would not approve of a World's Fair in New York City was that America just had a World's Fair 2 years prior. You remember I just mentioned a moment ago about the Century 21 exposition in Seattle, Washington. Of course, I'm sure you already know that that's not the end of the story. Rather than accept the decision of the Bureau, legendary architect Robert Moses, he went ahead and started planning the New York World's Fair anyways. Now, I can just imagine your faces out there. I bet you're curious how that conversation went between Robert Moses and the Bureau of International Exposition. Well, I'll tell you what, you're in luck because we've obtained this extremely rare audio from that actual meeting.
Listen, I don't care what those mooks in Seattle did in '62. That's the West Coast. I'm talking about the Big Apple here. You know, apples and oranges. That's what you comparing. This is apples. It's very different. So let's just reiterate. I'm going to be throwing the world's biggest World's Fair. Everybody's going to be there. Pepsi, General Electric, Ford Automotive, Walt Disney might even be there with his animatronic Lincoln thing, the Abraham guy. It's bigger than Great Aunt Ethel's behind at the barbecue. And if you've ever seen that, it's quite large.
So let's be honest. No World's Fair would be complete without its own monorail. Moses tasked the American Machine and Foundry Company to build a monorail for Flushing Meadows Fairground. Now, unlike Disneyland Monorail and the Seattle Monorail, this monorail ran below the tracks, suspended from overhead power units with rubber tires. 2 parallel tracks looped around the fairgrounds with 7 separate cars transporting attendees. Now, I have to imagine that choosing the AMF monorail instead of the all-wag monorail was a huge move at the time. If you're curious at all what led to that particular decision, here's some audio I think you'll find interesting.
Monorails, they all look the same. Everybody knows what a monorail looks like. Not very exciting. Mine, you're gonna ride under the track like you're hanging. Like a Peter Pan's flight maybe type of thing. By the way, you've looked at my name, Moses, right? Okay, let me just show you what I'm capable of. Look at your coffee cup. Watch. Yeah, you like that, right? Cream on one side, coffee on another. I'm not going to tell you how you do that. Just know, my name is Moses. I am descended from the guy that was on a mountain, and he had the 10 commanders and the instructions for how to live your life, that thing.
By April 3rd, 1964, all of the AMF monorails were up and running on the fairgrounds. Fashionable hostesses known as Ms. Monorail would greet each passenger as they boarded. The incredible panoramic view gave everyone the opportunity to view all the splendor of the New York's World's Fair. Heck, the AMF monorail even had its own theme song. The unfortunate part of this monorail is that it was never meant to last past the New York World's Fair. While systems in Seattle and Tokyo continue to serve as mass transportation, the AMF monorail was only meant to offer an 8-minute view of the fairgrounds in Flushing Meadows. So when the fair closed in 1965, it no longer had a purpose and was dismantled. Of course, the Mark II monorail at the Disneyland Park in Anaheim continued to thrill attendees. Throughout the 60s, it appeared on everything from toys to merchandise, heck, even board games. During that time, many of the attractions that were developed for the World's Fair started to move to Disneyland. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was the first of 3 attractions to open in 1965. It's a Small World would appear 1 year later. Unfortunately, Small World was the final attraction that Walt Disney would see open at the park. Disney passed away on December 15th, 1966. But before his death, Disney's team of Imagineers had been working on an entirely new project planned for Florida. This project would eventually evolve into what we all know as Walt Disney World, an incredible resort complete with attractions, hotels, and even its own monorail.
In the park itself, meanwhile, one of the last big jobs is the monorail, the sky-running railway that will circle the entire premises. The tall pylons are in place, the streamlined cars are being readied for a first trial run, and here come the tracks, arches of solid concrete. Getting them to the park is an engineering feat in itself, for each of these spans is 110 feet long and weighs approximately 55 tons. Lifting them into place becomes almost an exercise in bridge building. 300 of these giant beams to create 5 miles of elevated track.
Now, I'm sure there are some of you out there that consider yourself Disney World experts. But how many of you can recite this classic phrase?
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Please stand clear of the doors.
Por favor, manténganse
Alejado de las puertas.
Sleek, high-speed monorail trains silently whisk travelers around the Seven Seas Lagoon to one of the wonders of this new world, the dramatically different contemporary resort. From the hotels, the monorail tracks lead directly to the real heart of Walt Disney World, the Magic Kingdom. This, of course, is the place that most clearly reflects the man Walt Disney and the things he held to be of value. The wonders of nature, the fantasies of childhood, the spirit of America with nostalgia for the past and faith in the future, and above all, a sense of humor and fun.
The Mark IV monorail was built in 1969 and was meant to be the primary source of transportation to the Magic Kingdom. Because of that, it had to be much, much larger in order to transport even more people than the Disneyland counterpart. Of course, you wouldn't let just anyone drive one of these things, no. Only the best and the brightest were invited to pilot a Walt Disney World monorail.
Hey, I'm driving a monorail train. What a blast. It's pretty fun, you know, it's easy to drive a monorail because you don't have to steer.
During the 1960s, the monorail was admired as one of the quintessential symbols of the space age. Unfortunately, the transportation of the future never really took off, and while the future came and went, there are a few places where you can still hitch a ride on an authentic monorail.
Are there any other monorails I've ridden besides the one at Walt Disney World? Well, yes. This one, at the Tampa International Airport.
I've actually been on the airport one, and I've been on the Disneyland one, which, may I just say, both were better than the one that we have in our Disney World.
In New Orleans, back in 1984, we had the Louisiana World Exposition, the World's Fair. In fact, I am currently wearing a button on my hat that reflects that. It is 1984, the Louisiana World Exposition button. I wear it all the time on my hat. And for that fair, they had a monorail system that went around the entirety of the fair. I believe it had 3 stops, but again, it gave you a bird's eye view of the fair. It was really nice, really cool. Similar to the Walt Disney World monorail, but a bit smaller. And unfortunately, when the World's Fair here ended, so did the monorail. They took it down. However, it lives on. The pieces were brought to Miami for the Miami Zoo, and it is still in operation there at the Miami Zoo.
Well, I definitely learned a lot today. And now I want to hear from all you. Have you ever ridden a monorail in or outside of the Walt Disney World Resort? Tell me about it in the comments section below. And while you're down there, do me a favor and check out the description of this video as well, because I'm going to have all that important information for everybody who contributed with this video. Lily, the theme park kid, my buddy Greg, Nola, Tampa J, John. Thank you, John, so much for helping me acquire all that dialogue from Robert Moses. Of course, my buddy Chris, and the amazing, the astonishing, the wonderful Jeff Goldblum.
Where do you think you're going? We haven't finished, not by a long shot. You still haven't clicked that sexy subscribe button. There you go. Drag that cursor over and click the red heels and repeat after me. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Oh, Judy Garland, somewhere on a rainbow. Oh, I love you, Judy. What's that from? The Wizard of Oz. 2 points for anybody who got that in the comments. Yes.